I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words and as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith, joys and sorrows, gifts and needs, light speaking of hope, sign of God's truth and meaning, celebration of the life we share together.
Morning. Morning. Very good to be here again with you. We bid you welcome, you who come with weary spirit, seeking rest, who come with troubles that are too much with you, who come hurt and afraid. We bid you welcome, who come with hope in your heart, who come with anticipation in your step, who come proud and joyous. We bid you welcome, who are seekers of a new faith, who come to probe and explore, who come to learn. We bid you welcome, who enter this hall as a homecomer, who have found here room for your spirit, who have found in this people a family. Whoever you are, whatever you are, find this people family. We bid you welcome on your journey. We bid you welcome. Our hymn is number 298, Wake Now, My Senses.
are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. We welcome you to share your joys and sorrows by writing them down on the card you found on your chair and placing it in the basket that comes by you, or by typing in the chat box in Zoom. Know that whatever your heart is holding today, whether shared or not, we are with you.
According to my script, this is the time for the story. I don't see any children here, unless some of you are hiding something. So I leave it to you. Would you like to hear the story I prepared or no? All right, go for it.
I made it younger.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we just gone through the high holy days of Judaism, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Kippur, some say. And so my story is a Jewish story, a Jewish tale taken from the ancient Talmud, and I have updated it just a little bit. So a long time ago, there were some people who wanted to build a church, but they couldn't figure out where to build it. So after I told you the story about Douglas and Matthew, maybe you can guess where they built their church. Those names happen to be the names of my sons. But they helped me keep the story straight in my mind. So Douglas and Matthew were brothers. Douglas had a wife and 5 children and lived in a large farmhouse. Matthew lived alone in a small house. The 2 brothers shared a farm together. They planted and looked after their crops together. One fall, they had been busy harvesting their crops. 100 bundles of wheat had been harvested and tied up, and then divided. 50 bundles were stored in Douglas's barn and 50 in Matthew's barn. They were tired, and so Douglas said, "Matthew, why don't you come home to my house? My wife will have a wonderful dinner. You can talk to my children. It'll be nice to be together." And so Matthew did. And they had a nice short evening, and then Matthew was tired, of course, of the day's work, so he went home early. On the way home, he got to thinking how good my brother is to me. He gives me half a supply of wheat, but I have only myself to take care of, and he has a wife and 5 children. So he said, "I know what I'm going to do." And so very early the next morning, he took 10 bushels of wheat, quietly sneaked into Douglas's barn and left the wheat there, thinking Matthew and Douglas would not know. And then they met, and they had another day out in the fields, working the farm and so forth. And then Douglas invited Matthew for dinner again. And Matthew said, "No, I'm tired. I think I'm going home." Well, Douglas got to thinking, Matthew is all by himself, and I have 5 children to help me, to the extent that they help me, with my farm. So it isn't fair that I have so much wheat. And so very late that night, he took 10 bundles of his wheat over to Matthew's barn and left it. And next morning, Matthew got up and counted his wheat, 10, 20, 50 bundles of wheat. I thought I'd give some away. Well, I must have miscounted. So he took 10 bundles and sneaked them over to Douglas's barn. Anyway, this went on, as you could tell. Each time they counted their bundles of wheat, they found not only that they had enough, but they had more than they thought they had. And so one night, So at the very same time, they got the idea, they were going to take the bundles of wheat to the other's barn. And it was a moonlit night, just like last night. I mean, what a gorgeous full moon it was last night. So on just that kind of a night, each of them in their creaky carts, each of them thought, I hear a strange noise, and they were going up this hill together, same hill. And then the moon came up behind the clouds, and the two brothers met on the hill, and they knew what they were doing. The more they gave away, the more they had. In fact, that's one of the songs from Not Being a Rebel Star. Do you, Mr. Singer, of Love and Memory? Love is something if you give it away. And so the two brothers met, and where else would they go to church but right here on Cooley Road in Canandaigua, the church of the beloved community, or the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. And that is the story for you children this morning. I hope you enjoyed it.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts support our church and its work. That word is summarized in our covenant. Covenant for UUCC says, in service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value of each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for home. Value our diverse opinions and engage respectfully in all interactions. 1/4 of our plate collections on the harvest season goes to Habitat for Humanity, an organization to build strength, stability, and self-reliance through shelter. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket, or if you're joining us from home, by visiting canandaigua.org/connection/donate, or mailing a check to UUCC at 3024 Cooley Road in Canandaigua, 14424. In either case, make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. Joys and sorrows. Thinking of Harry Sportsweller, what joy he brought to our church. Thinking of Liz, his wife, at this time. Thinking of the kind, smiling Harry who greeted us many of us on Sunday mornings. Holding a concern for a dear friend who was going to be facing a very challenging week. This is Flowers Day. Daughter still in the hospital, hopefully getting better after surgery. Thankful for people turning out, showing up, and rallying with us for reproductive rights here in Canandaigua, next to the Main Street YMCA. Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Join us. Well, we have no children for childcare today, but anybody who's childish at heart goes to NC. This one simply says, Dad has advanced lung cancer. I will not drop a stone for these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts. Whatever is in your heart today, we are with you.
I will note that Bill, creative fellow that he is played Magic Penny. Love is something if you give it away. If I were musical, I would have sung it along with it, but I will spare you that. But the creativity, love is something if you give it away. That song is Magic Penny by Milton Friedman. Is that in our King book?
No.
No, that's not. It's too bad. It's a wonderful song. Which prepares us perhaps for our morning meditation. So I invite you to get comfortable in your chairs. Breathe in, breathe out through your masks. Thinking of this gorgeous day which we are given today. I invite you to join the spirit of meditation. For all that is good in the world, we make thanksgiving. For the beauty of the earth, we sing praises. For the joy of human companionship, we say, Amen. For the abundance of creation, we give gratitude. For the blessings of being, we are grateful. In the serenity of this hour and the sanctity of this space, we gaze upon life not with rose-colored glasses, but with a heartfelt appreciation of all that is good. While the world surrounding us seems in the grip of evil, we remember the good which graces our everyday. When greed and avarice seem to rule humanity, we recall the generosity of others. Where pessimism about our predicament holds sway, we conjure up an image of possibility. It is no false confidence we seek here, for we know and experience quiet courage everywhere. It is no naive optimism we would exhibit, for we experience the devotion of those fired by hope. In the quietude of this holy hour, we remind ourselves of all the good in the world and are glad. Let us be silent together. Amen.
we can hear it through the speakers here.
We can hear it here.
We
It's
can
not,
hear it through the speakers here.
okay.
It's not coming through Zoom.
Correct. It's not coming through the pulpit.
Right, right is on. So the microphones. There's a connection from the camera.
Does he need to get closer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
You're not getting it.
They said it sounds garbled.
This connects to the. It's coming from-
Technology.
But is it supposed to come from the soundboard?
Great way it works.
All of those are,
Yeah, but you're getting your sound from the camera.
right.
And so I think it's supposed to sound.
Or here. Huh.
Where would it connect to the sound?
All right. we can. Well, let's go.
The people on Zoom are having difficulty hearing what's going on. So, no, but this microphone is working because you can hear me, right? Yeah, so it's not that, it's the connection somehow between the soundboard, the camera, and the computer. And the A-list technicians are all away today. So we'll just continue. Ready for the workshop.
But you can hear me here, can you?
Yes.
Go ahead. True confession. I went to a Buffalo Bills football game Monday night, September 19th, in Orchard Park. Why did I go? Two of my ministerial colleagues put pressure on me. And we had a great time despite having a flat tire on the way. We had our parking lot open house meal and so forth on the New York State Thruway, waiting for AAA to come. But we had a great time, and why wouldn't we? The Bills beat their nemesis, the Tennessee Titans, 41-7. I could tell my companions were fascinated by my commentary of the game. After all, I quarterbacked the Canandaigua Academy Braves back in the day. Josh Allen was of particular interest to me. For non-football fans, are there any non-football fans here, perhaps? Yeah, probably there are. My wife would be among them. Anyway, Josh Allen, you should know, is the star quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. And he had a fantastic game. So from one quarterback to another, I could but admire what he did. Then it came to me, he should have excelled in this game. After all, this 26-year-old kid had just signed a $250 million contract with the Buffalo Bills. I'm sure if I broke it down, he probably made more on each completed pass than most of us make in a year's hard work. That's okay. He's really good at what he does. Take it from the next quarterback. He's really good. But wait a minute. Some of us who don't make $250 million in a career are pretty good too. What is wrong with this picture? Maybe nothing. Maybe that's just the way it is in America, circa 2022. However, it does raise a few issues with me, and perhaps with you. We Americans, who are 5% of the world's population, have 20% of the world's income. Yet, 1 in 10 Americans now lives in poverty. The poverty line for a family of 4 is $26,400. The top 20% of families in America earn over half the income. The top 5% earn 23%. The wealthiest 1% of Americans own half of the wealth of this country, as much as the bottom 50%. Now, if you are overwhelmed by this avalanche of figures, as I sometimes am, and my wife says I should never use them, people can't keep track of them, and I agree with that. Consider the familiar pyramid metaphor for income distribution. We notice how pointed the pyramid is at the top and how broad is its base. If we make an income pyramid out of a child's blocks, with each layer portraying $1,000 of income, the peak would be far higher than the Eiffel Tower, but most of us would be within a yard of the ground. Perhaps that's easier to visualize. Distribution. Why this inequality? How much do we deserve? In our competitive society, what do we do with those who lose? How much is enough? Now, I admit I did not fully articulate these questions, much less answers to them, in Orchard Park that Monday night, cheering on a group of beefy millionaires who were entertaining me and whose annual minimum salary is $705,000. That's for the guy who sits on the bench and maybe he doesn't play for several games, or maybe kicks a couple of times. That's the way it is. But we ministers are often raising difficult questions without proper answers. And no doubt this sermon will be an example of the same. But as we have just gone to the Jewish High Holy Days, I draw upon Jewish wisdom with this story. When a rabbi was asked, "Why is it that you rabbis put much of your teaching in the form of question?" The rabbi replied, "So what's wrong with the question?" You can use that, you teachers. You can use that if you like. I have long contemplated inequality in America. Great gaps in income and wealth. We rather take it for granted that's the economic way we look at the world. However, we may have taken the next step and contemplated the inequity of America, a term that suggests a moral component, which opens up the whole question of fairness. Kids know what fairness is. Just ask them. It is very basic. It's a basic question. They know that if one child is given one cookie and little sister or big sister or brother are given 3, unfair, of course. It is we adults who have more trouble with fairness. So inequality is an economic issue. Inequity is a moral issue. It is the harvest season, the election season, the football season. So what do they have in common, as I asked in my little blurb for this Sunday? The issue of fairness. We want our farmers to be fairly compensated for the work they do. We want our elected officials to be fair in passing public policy. And of course, we want the football game to be fair, played by the rules, especially so that the Buffalo Bills can beat the Pittsburgh Steelers this afternoon. And I have a date and a suburban bar with my son and friends of his to watch that game. And if the Bills should lose, it clearly would be unfair. But isn't unfairness baked into the very nature of things? Sometimes we experience our life as unfair. But I'm talking economic justice now, not the overall unfairness of life. That's a sermon for another day. And while the American economy has been so inordinately successful in production, it has been much less successful in distribution. Poverty exists in the midst of plenty, and most Americans have become inured to the stark reality of economic apartheid in this country. Dinners without appetites at one end of the table, and appetites without dinners at the other. In the words of the 19th century Unitarian Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're kind of still in it, we hope the tail end, income and wealth gaps have become chasms. The world's 10 richest people more than doubled their wealth, while millions lost their income. And some of us have reactions to this perceived inequality. I have mine. For example, we probably all know people who have moved from New York to Florida to escape New York's income taxes. They made their money here and spend it there. Now they want the federal government, with our tax dollars, to bail them out for the results of Hurricane Ian, I guess you would pronounce it. Now, to be fair, our tax dollars also are used for helping us with New York's superstorm Sandy. There are elements of hypocrisy and unfairness here, but also elements of community, the common good. Meanwhile, as the individual wealth of American oligarchs keep rising, our public infrastructure, both material and personal, crumbles. The COVID crisis has lifted the curtain on many of our already extant problems. A grossly inadequate public health system, public education system, public health system, again, as they say, our crumbling infrastructure, and our tattered safety net. All have been brought into clear focus by this pandemic. Our very democracy is precarious. Government, often in the grips of the oligarchs, seems handcuffed to do much about these problems. Oligarchs, autocrats, and often they are the same, seem to be thriving throughout the world. One hopes, well, one wonders about the United States, but one always hopes. We see, for example, in our own country, strong opposition to one proposal that has been passed, the increase of staff members at the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Why? Up to now, you or I, we, are more likely to have our tax returns examined and checked by an auditor from the IRS than are Donald Trump or Elon Musk. Why? Because it just costs too much to examine their, what I would call, loophole-riven tax returns, and much easier and cheaper to find mistakes in ours. One of the more intriguing images, and I love this image, I found this as I was researching for this sermon, an image of the uber wealthy is Jeff Bezos' smiling image on the side of a rapidly moving Amazon delivery truck. The US Capitol building in the background with the caption, Tax me if you can. Can't get it out of my head. But my favorite, according to a report from reporters from the New York Times, former President Donald Trump paid $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and $750 the next year. The authors explained that he paid no income taxes at all in 10 of the previous 15 years. Largely because he reported losing much more money than he made. Or down. Most of his core enterprises, the golf courses, the conservative magnet hotel in Washington, D.C., report losing millions, if not tens of millions of dollars each year. However, they continue that the tax audit looms, and within the next 4 years, more than $300 billion in loans, for which he is personally responsible, will come due. Just ask Attorney General Chris James for details. Now, there are exceptions to this pattern, of course. This is another dismal pattern I've presented to you. And our federal government, even under Donald Trump, and more particularly under Joe Biden, have invested in the common good. The CARES Act, the PPP, Payroll Protection Program, the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. All those have tried to redress some problems that we've had. In 2021, the American Rescue Plan, for example, helped keep 50 million people out of poverty. During the COVID-19 crisis, we saw income and wealth gaps turn into chasms, as I've suggested. The world's 10 richest individuals more than doubled their wealth. US billionaires found their wealth go up by 58%, or $1.7 trillion. These are staggering numbers. So outrageous that the state of Massachusetts, our next door neighbor, which has a flat income tax, that is, all pay the same rate no matter their income, is having a constitutional referendum this November 8th, requiring a 4% tax on income above $1 million. I wish I could vote in Massachusetts. But not that I am one of those vengeful tax the rich crowd, exploiting class warfare. We're already in class warfare, and the rich are winning. But I only want to affirm the words of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, taxes are the price we pay for civilization. I only want a justly shared burden in a society of shared prosperity. We simply do not have that now. There are a few who have too much, more than enough, and too many who do not have enough. In a time of increasing inequality, exacerbated by inflation, many of us are walking or perhaps even trying to run up the down escalator, while we see the wealthy riding up at warp speed the escalator on the opposite side of the building. That is not to say I believe that we all should be equal. Equality is not equity, and I prefer the latter. That is fairness, a degree of fairness. For example, in my seminar on economic justice, I suggest a simple mind game, which I call the original position exercise. So put on your thinking caps, get in gear, think about this, and see how you would respond. Imagine that you are at a gathering of this congregation, and your task is to design a just economic society. How would you do it? You wish to establish economic guidelines for a truly just order, but you live behind a veil of ignorance. You don't know how you will come out in this order. And what I've done, I have suggested 10 what I call work positions. And in the class, I give people pieces of paper with the 10 positions on them, and they are to fill in what they think each work position ought to earn, ought to be compensated for a year's work. And I start with $1 million and 10 work positions, and your job is to allocate that $1 million in annual salary to the following positions: artist, teacher, farmer, lawyer, manual laborer, minister, of course, welfare recipient, business executive, carpenter, doctor. Now, of course, one could add or subtract or change any of this, but the point is, what would be fair? How would you allocate these resources if you were in charge? We assume, of course, that we all want a fair society. And of course, there is a curveball in all of this for Unitarian Universalists as we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And there are several more values we have to put into the mix, which makes it very complicated. But just because it's complicated doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it. Try it sometime. Make up your own list. Not surprisingly, having given this little exercise only to Unitarian Universalists, the relative assignment of income to these work positions is much more equal than their experience in the real world of survival of the fittest in our economic order. The creative tension between this ideal world that we might create as a result of an exercise and what we see about us is quite simply one of our tasks as citizens and as religious people. What might that look like? Consider this. It seems that more than 3/4 of Republican evangelicals want the United States to be declared a Christian nation. Be careful what you wish for. If the United States was not just declared a Christian nation, but behaved like a Christian nation in the biblical sense, there would be some dramatic changes. I wonder if they realize that. You may recall that Jesus is quoted as saying that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Pretty radical stuff, I would say. It's Matthew 19, verse 24. And you may remember that the Roman Catholic bishops in their economic letter to the country found a preferential option for the poor in the Bible. As one keen observer notes, it is easier to fit through the eye of a camel than to be needled into the kingdom of heaven. I really prefer our religious pluralism. But if this were truly a Christian nation in the ethical sense, our tax structure would be very much different. Would be upended. Elon Musk would be paying so much more in taxes that he could not afford 6,000 Teslas, but perhaps 6. But don't check my math. I did it on my computer here, and I couldn't figure out any better than that, but you get the idea. Instead of one man having the power of Twitter in his pocket, he would have to write letters to the editor and preach sermons just like you or me. And all the preachers would be saying, "Blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you that hunger now, for you shall be satisfied." If this were a Christian nation indeed, rather than just declared a Christian nation. And I'm not suggesting for sure. Now, a dramatic example of what this might look like came from a favorite movie review of mine, from a movie I actually saw. Heavens Above. It's an old movie. Any of you see it? Heavens Above. Okay. Here's the movie. Here's the review. The Reverend John E. Smallwood, Peter Sellers. Remember Peter Sellers? Johnny Smallwood arrives as vicar of Holy Trinity Church or Brisbane Pava, an English village, contentedly thriving under the aegis of the wealthy Despard family and the pill it manufactures, sedative, pepper-upper, and laxative combined. A perfect trinity. Smallwood takes biblical injunctions literally and persuades Lady Despard to do likewise. In accordance with the text, go and sell what thou hast and give to the poor, Lady Despard freely distributes food to those who will take it, driving butcher, baker, and candlestick maker out of business. And when Smallwood pronounces that the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is more efficacious than a triple action pill, sales go down, unemployment goes up, and mob violence ensues. Culture, we learn, maintains its precarious balance only so long as everyone is committed to the ideology of profit sharing and of it is better to receive than to give. For as an authentic Christian, unless they are able to win everyone to their reversal ideals, simply succeeds in giving impetus to riotous anarchy. The movie ends with the altruistic vicar in a rocket propelled to outer space. Well, just how much is enough? A debatable question. We might define enough as receiving a minimum wage. The federal minimum wage now is $7.25 and hasn't been changed since 2009. Of course, we've had inflation since then, of course. So it is worth very little. New York's minimum wage is around $15. It's on a scale moving up each year, and it differs from place to place. We might define enough as a living wage, or any living wage campaigns, a living wage being considerably more than a minimum wage. And there is also a self-sufficiency standard that has been developed, reflecting what a typical family needs to live a decent, comfortable life. Many times that of the minimum wage. Just how much is enough? What is fair? I can't really answer that question, but I warned you, right? I said I wouldn't have answers to hard questions. Tough questions, no answers. The point is that our city, our county, our state, and our world fall woefully short of answers, much less even having asked the questions themselves, as I have tried to do. Our job is to ask them, to ask ourselves if we have enough, or more than enough, and what to do about it. And so while I'm far better at raising hard questions than giving difficult answers, simple answers, I did help organize a conference in Rochester that addressed this problem. It was on the universal basic income. Rochester has a pilot program in giving a certain amount of money to a certain select number of families to see how they do. It's an experiment that's been cast all around the country and many cities and towns and even in Alaska, as I will point out. And the results have been good. People make better decisions when they have some money to go on. They get jobs, they get education and better jobs. The UBI, a guaranteed income then, has a long history, goes as far back as the Emperor Trajan from 98 to 117 of the Common Era, who personally gave 650 denarii to all common Roman citizens who applied. Imagine that. And that threads its way from American worthies like Thomas Paine and Henry George. And then in the 1940s, Lady Juliet Evangeline Rhys Williams of England proposed that a flat grant or social dividend be given to all English citizens, regardless of their economic circumstances. Liberal economists like Nobel Prize winning George Stigler and John Kenneth Galbraith have supported it. Even today, you probably know this, but I do not, the state of Alaska, which has such enormous reserves of natural resources, gives an annual stipend to each and every citizen, everybody, whether you work or not, no matter who you are, every citizen gets a stipend. Most surprisingly, however, this idea has caught on with at least one conservative economist, Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winner. In his book, Capitalism and Freedom, which I commend to you as a very intriguing book, proposed a negative income tax as the solution for addressing poverty in this country. He suggested an income floor below which no one would be allowed to fall. People could build on that floor by working, keeping the lion's share of their earnings, and then a progressive income tax would kick in at a certain level. And so he had combined a safety net, this basic floor below which no one could fall, with incentives to work to earn more money if you wish to. All of this would be administered by the Internal Revenue Service. A decent idea, I think. However, Friedman didn't include the costs of healthcare, childcare, and differences in people who are simply unable to earn a living by themselves. They could not be reasonably included in this plan, but nevertheless, a very intriguing idea. Then in 1971, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, New York State Senator, was then a domestic advisor to President Richard Nixon. He proposed a family assistance program. It was defeated by a coalition of conservatives who opposed any guarantee and liberals who thought the guarantee was too low. I was among them. My liberal opposition to the measure, a sermon on guaranteed annual poverty, is one of my most regrettable public pronouncements. If we had only established the principle of a basic income, we could have built upon it and might be in a very different place today. That sermon was an example of the perfect being the enemy of the good. And I give my confession. But my basic conclusion is summarized in the words of the 17th century British author, Sir Francis Bacon, who once said, "Money is like manure. If you spread it around, it does a lot of good. But if you pile it up in one place, it stinks like hell." But I do contend that fairness would be better served if all the wealth were spread around a bit more. For example, if we took just a pittance from the billionaires of our country and invested it in our children, if the US, for example, adopted Canada's child benefit model, our child poverty rate would be cut in half, just adopting the model of Canada. Fairness might look more like a simple graphic, which advertised the March 13th conference on solving poverty in Rochester. So picture this in your mind. We're in the playoff season, baseball playoff season. The Mets won last night, by the way, which is good. But three people of different sizes are watching a baseball game, standing on three equal sized boxes outside the outfield fence. That is equality. All the boxes are the same, but the larger person can see the action. The middle-sized person sees, by standing on tiptoes, sees part of it, and the small person sees nothing at all. In the second frame, they're still standing there, but the box sizes have been adjusted so all three can equally see the game, but they are still watching from behind the fence. In the third and last frame, all three are still watching the game from inside the fence. They are in the stadium. prosperous players in a just economy. That is fairness, or as I would call it, the beloved community. In the words of Latin American prayer, to those who hunger, give bread. To those who have bread, the hunger for righteousness. Amen. As we leave this community of the Spirit, may we remember the difficult lesson that each day offers more things than we can do. Therefore, may we learn to separate that which matters most from that which matters least of all. May we do what needs to be done, postpone what does not, and be at peace with what we can be and do. Our closing hymn is number 140, Hail the Glorious Golden City.
join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice? We extinguish its flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These to carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And please stay for follow. The notice about
How are you? How are you? Good to see you.